In this video, we're going to look at the is not, in, and not in operators. Now, the is operator is used to check if two objects are the same object, not that they are of equal value, but that they are the actual same object in memory. And right here, you'll see that I have str_1 equals hello and str_2 equals hello. Now, these are two separately created and initialized variables. However, because strings are immutable types, these are in fact the same object. String1 and string2 are the same object. So if I were to put in here str1 is str_2 and run this, the result is going to be true, and it's going to output true. Well, how can we actually see that this is the case? Well, Python has a built-in function ID. And if I just put ID with some parentheses and hover over it, it tells us that it returns the identity of an object and is guaranteed to be unique among simultaneously existing objects. And right here, we'll see that it returns an integer value. So if I were to say result equals ID of string1 and run this, we'll see that we get this number here, and this is the ID of the string1 object. Now, if I run it again, we'll see that we get a different number. It is the same object, but each time we run this, it's getting stored in a different place in memory, so it gets a new unique identifier. So if I were down here in the print to change this to print both the result, which is going to contain ID of string1, and then I did a comma and also passed in the ID of string2, we're going to see that these, in fact, are the same numbers. So right here, we have this long number here that ends in 5520, and then we have this long number here that ends in 5520. Now, if I were to change string2 to equal goodbye instead of hello and run this again, we'll see that we now have different numbers. This one ends in 7152, and this one ends in 8336. And if I were to remove that and have this now check is str1 is str2, when I run this, it's going to say false because they are not the same object. Now, this does not happen with mutable objects. So an example of a mutable object is a list. So I'm going to create two new variables called list1, and we will simply give it 1, 2, 3, and then we'll create list2 and give it the value of 1, 2, 3 as well. If I can hit 3 instead of 4. And down here for result, we will do list1 is list2. And when we run this, we're going to get false. That even though these are the same values, unlike strings, which are immutable objects, lists are mutable. So it works a little bit differently when you are checking to see if they are in fact the same object. These two lists are stored as completely separate objects in memory. And we could also use the is not keywords, which is just going to negate this value. So since this would have came out as false if it was list1 is list2, when I throw in the not in there, it's going to give us true because list1 is not list2. However, if I were to create a third variable called list3 and I set it to be equal to list1, now if I were to say list1 is equal or is list3, we'll remove the not, we're going to get true because it is pointing to the same list. And if I were to change or modify list 3 in any way, because list 3 and list 1 are the same object in memory, any changes to list 3 would also happen to list 1. So just remember, for immutable values such as strings, numerical values, tuples, if they are exactly the same value, they will also be the same object in memory, whereas immutable types such as lists, sets, and dictionaries will be different objects even though they may have the same values. Now let's look at the in operator. So I'm going to go ahead and create another string. I will put hello world, how are you in it. And we are going to use the result to check to see if the string how in string1. So we are looking to see if the sequence of characters HOW is anywhere in this string here. And if I run it, it's going to tell us true because we have how right here. And if I were to just simply put H in it, it's going to also say true because there's a H right here. Now, if I were to look for something like Z, which is not in it, we get the value false. And the same thing works for list or any other collection. So we know that the value 1 is in our list 1 up here. So if I were to check is 1 in list 1, we would get true. And I could throw in the not keyword on the left side of in here. So it says 1 not in list 1, which is false, and we'll get false. And that is pretty much it for the is not, in, and not in keywords. The portion about mutable and immutable objects is important to remember because that's going to come up again when we get to functions, because there are issues that can arise when using default values with mutable objects such as list.